Okay, thank you for joining me again. So today, human-computer interaction, lesson 2. So what we'll do, we can do a brief recap of the previous lesson. We'll maybe look at some of the key terms and some of the items that we covered, and then we can move on with today's lesson. So what did we start with the last day? I suppose some definitions and how graphical user interfaces have revolutionized the way that people interact with computers, and that interaction is known as HCI, or human-computer interaction. But remember, it's not just confined to PCs and mobile devices. It's also relevant to all the different type of devices that you might have in your home. So all the appliances, if you think of any machine really that you interact with, so anything, it could be a car, it could be a plane, all those things have interfaces, and all those interfaces have been designed by somebody at some stage. We looked at the development of the interface. So this is a Xerox interface from the late 70s or early 80s. And we can see some of the limitations at play there. You know, the pixelated display, you know, the lack of color in the display. And then we talked about other ways to interact with machines. And we spoke about voice interfaces and those type of things. And I suppose you can contrast this older type of display with something that we're, you know, more used to seeing today. We've got lots of vibrant colors, lots of nice looking icons, and it's all packaged up in a device that's easy to carry, right? So then we looked at what was the definition of human-computer interaction. And there's two main forks to the definition. You've got the human side, the person, but you've also got the device side, the computer. And then we looked at how the study of human-computer interaction, it draws supporting knowledge on both the machine and the human side. So on the machine side, you have the development of the interface in a technical sense. So in terms of computer graphics, operating systems, programming language. But then on the human side, you have, you know, communication theory, psychology, linguistics, those sort of things. So those two things combine then to create what we call human-computer interaction. We looked at, you know, what happens when an interface is poorly designed. And, you know, this was a shot of the cleanup from 3 Mile Island, where one of the main issues there was the design of the interface. And it was just very difficult to use. So the usability was low. And we've also looked at, you know, maybe the learnability of systems as well, and how in the past they've tried to change the layouts in cockpits, but it seems that the pilots had always ingrained, the standard layout, you know, so they were naturally reverting back to what they knew. So I suppose the learnability factors on those new interfaces would have been high. So, and it's really that feeling where when you pick up or try and use a device for the first time and you feel, are the menus, are the icons, are the commands in the right places? You know, does this feel familiar to me? And that's an important factor as well. So the next thing we looked at was the development of HCI, and it goes right back to the 1960s into the 70s, where you have this WIMP concept that Xerox introduced, which you can start to see the formation of something that would be familiar to us today as a computer. You have, you know, a screen, you have a keyboard, you have a mouse, those type of things. But really, it was in the 70s when this WIMP concept, Windows icon menus and pointers, it became, properly available in the 80s. And then it was pushed around worldwide, I suppose, by Apple. And you had this concept of what you see is what you get, So and you had this concept of layering and this concept of the icons, the picture of the icon matched the sense of the thing. So you had small graphic images on desktops, we call them icons today, desktops, files, and a rubbish bin. And these were all it was quite simple for the user to use. So you clicked on an image and you held it, and then you could move the image accordingly. So it felt natural, and it felt linked to the type of movements that we like to make as people. So this Apple desktop design, it I suppose, became the de facto standard for how people interact with computers. Before that, really, you had, a more basic system, and that you had to interact with computers using a command line system, which is a series of, typed codes and prompts, quite difficult to use. And also the output you get from the machine is quite difficult to understand because it's all text-based. So this is examples of the Windows prompt and then the Mac terminal command, but very much you're talking to the computer in a language that's more native to the computer. So there's no translation between the person and the device, so quite challenging to use. The user interfaces have developed over time to be more natural. I think this is Windows 7, maybe Windows 8. And again, it was designed to look like something that you could press, almost like a mobile phone, as opposed to a traditional sort of menu system like what I have here. So as I go through these, you can see new things appearing based on my movements, but this was very much more icon based. And it was, I suppose, designed to encourage the user to press. And around the same time, touch screens on PCs became more prevalent as well. Remember, we're not just talking about PCs or about laptops. We're talking about lots of different devices. So this was one of the earlier models of the iPod, where you had a scroll wheel and you could scroll clockwise. And then this would move sort of up and down, and you could press the center select button, and that would confirm your choice. Web user interfaces, they're all common. They're all, I suppose, familiar to us today. It's just another type of a graphical user interface, but it's hosted in a browser on a computer. So it's not platform specific, So you have enabling technologies like Flash, like Java, Silverlight, those sort of technologies. And what they do is they allow you to interact with the interface and to make it more draggable and more, I suppose, interactive. But I suppose this would be an example of a fairly standard design. You've got a menu system across the top for navigation. You have groupings for the different types of services and the different types of offerings that this business do, and it's all hosted in a browser. And you'll see this menu system. We looked at it later, didn't we? You'll see this menu system, this hierarchical structure, on lots and lots of websites today. So if we pull up, let's go to our Apple site, or if we go to any of the main websites, you'll see this. Let me just expand it out. So here's your main navigation area. you'll click here and then you get secondary menus. If I click here, I'll get all the different Macs. And what they're trying to do through the use of icons, so they're giving you pictures as well as text to help you make the selection. And you'll see you've got good use of white space on the site. Let's just zoom back a little bit. Nice big images, nice, and you see they're giving us big targets as well to click on. You see the way my cursor changes to a hand. So I don't even have to be right over the image. It actually changes. See, even when I get that close to the image. We'll look at that later in the lesson or in the next lesson. So it's a very well designed, very engaging to look at, nice colors, nice use of big white spaces, and just very kind of clickable and engaging. So you can see that's an example of a kind of a contemporary sort of website, but it's all based on this hierarchical structure where you go to a home page, you have pages beneath that, and then you might have sub pages as well. Different from a linear structure. A linear structure, if you think of a book and the pages in a book or the chapters in a book, apps tend to work in more linear structures, in that you go into a page and you tend to go to the next screen, sort of following that, right? So again, these are sort of good examples. And then we looked at a bad example. And, you know, the choice of colors, the size of icons, just no uniformity to the font, and just very confusing and very garish to actually look at. So quite confusing to the user and quite jolting to our eyes. And remember, when we're designing interfaces, we're designing for all different types of people, you know. So the more inclusive that we can make the interfaces and the designs, the better they'll be received. So you have other forms of input and output. So when I issue a command to the computer, I'm giving the computer input. So I can do that in different ways. You know, if I'm using my phone, I can talk to Siri and I can use my voice. Or if I'm in the car and I want to send a message, I can use my voice. If I'm on my computer, traditionally, I'm using a kind of a mouse and keyboard, or if I'm on a mobile device, I'm using my sense of touch, and I might get alerts back from the device. So any command I give to the computer is input. Now, any feedback I get from the system is what we call output. So that could, in this sense, it's the screen that I'm looking at right now. So if I get a haptic alert back from my phone to tell me something has been confirmed, that again is output. Sound coming through a system as well is output from the system to the user. And then you get what they call multimodal feedback. So that's when you're playing a games console or something, and you're getting the visuals from the screen, you're getting the sound from the speakers, and you're also getting maybe some haptic feedback or vibration alerts from the device, right? So the more inclusive that we can make the devices, the better they'll be. So you have things like voice recognition software, screen readers, a device called a head wand, eye tracking, and a braille keyboard. So they might assist people who are, have difficulties moving or are partially sighted. We looked at that activity, and then the last thing we looked at, again, we reminded ourselves of this WIMP system: windows, icons, menus, and pointers. And menu systems today, they even have help functions built in, where they actually tell you. So I have a couple of ways to navigate. So the app I'm on right now, which is called Keynote, it's the app that's displaying the supplies. So see the way that the app is actually telling me where the command I'm looking for is. So I can type in another command, save, and it'll actually show me the menu that the thing's in. Now, if I know where the command is, I know my save is in my file menu. I can go here and I can scroll down, and then I have my options to save. But again, these are sort of organized a little bit like a website, and like this is my main navigation across the top. And these are my sub pages of my sub menus. Okay, so that's it. So we can move on. Any questions about any of that, or any comments that anyone would like to make? No, we'll proceed. Okay, good. So information systems, and what we're talking about are the devices that we're interacting with. They can be made more interactive by including sounds, animations, and images, avoiding long passages of text, using quizzes and polls, and using animations which require input from the user. So if you think of something like on your phone, when you want to rearrange the apps, and you hold down one of the apps, and then the apps jiggle a little bit. And you can use JavaScript to add hotspots that give user feedback on their selections. And all these things add up to actually improve the user experience. So readability is important, right, to help people understand the information system. And well-designed and readable information should ideally break up long passages of text and use headings and subheadings. Let's just go back to look at the copy on this website. See the way there's just small bursts of text that tell you exactly what you want to know, right? See the way everything is organized in columns. So it shows me the devices, and then beneath it, it gives me the column that gives me all the device information. So somebody has sat down and again, very short, punchy kind of passages. If the use, think of a newspaper, when you pick it up, it has a headline, and then it has some subtext, and it has maybe the article text underneath it. So you can see the use of fonts here as well is very uniform. So you've got these little punchy subheadings that let us know very quickly just a secondary piece of information about the device. But all the main headings, if you notice, they're in exactly the same font, and it's the same size. Do you see all this text? Same size, same size, same size, same size. So everything is nice and uniform. And even the images have been styled. Look, they're all nice and punchy, and they're on a nice and vibrant, and they're on a white backdrop. And then what happens is they break up the white space through this use of gray sort of in the background. So again, very, very good design, very usable, and it sort of follows the things that we're talking about. This breaking up passages of text, using readable fonts and font sizes, and there's other things you can do then to engage your users. All right, so let's look at this. So when creating an information system, it's always important to make sure that adequate testing takes place, right? So what we're talking about is testing our design to try and measure its usability, right? So any of the web pages we look at, so if I just open this in Safari, and then what I have is I have responsive design mode. So responsive design mode allows me to mimic different display sizes, because sometimes, you know, you're building a design and you're trying to envisage how it's going to be used. So the easiest thing is to try and, you know, maybe have a look at it on different devices. So this would be your typical desktop type of site, right? You can see my devices and my browser sizes along the top here, right? So this is my desktop site, and that's the one I'm traditionally used to looking at when I'm on my computer. But if it's something like this, if I go to maybe one of the smaller sizes, this is what I'm looking at when I'm on my phone. So it's more stacked. So the images, you know, I'm being asked to scroll through them. And what companies do now is they actually build almost like multiple sites, and those sites are served intelligently. You can see this one, so everything, so instead of blocks of 4 like we had on our desktop site, see the way this is all 1, 2, 3, 4. What they do is they actually stack them on the mobile side. So we have blocks of 2, and down here we'll have 2 more. So this is the site responding to how, you know, to the device that the user's on. And this is what they call responsive design mode. A lot of browsers have this function, right? Another way you can do it is you have a site, you're on Google Chrome, and just you resize your browser and you pull it in, and then you can see the site changing, okay? And then it's more like a desktop, or sorry, it's more like a mobile kind of browser or a mobile device. So again, this is mobile mode. And then when I pull it out, you can see they've actually, they're flipping using different images. And this is my desktop mode, right? And again, designers do this as part of the testing process when they launch, before they launch their websites, but before they launch their other types of user interfaces as well. Right, so what should testing involve? Check that hyperlinks are in the correct place. So this is your menu system for your site. These are your hyperlinks. These type of things. So this menu system across the top that we looked at. These are our hyperlinks. Check that buttons or breadcrumb links work properly. So when people click on things, you know, if I click on a link that says contact, am I taken to the contact page? Check that web pages display correctly on different browsers. Check that web displays display correctly on different devices. So desktop, laptop, that type of thing. Ensuring that the interface created matches the wireframe design. So the wireframe design is, you know, your prototype that you try and build as part of your initial design process, and ensure that multimedia players for sound and video work properly as well. And then at all times, try and ensure that the website is available and accessible to as many people as possible, and indeed to users with disabilities. Right? So this is sort of a snapshot of, you know, the sort of current interface thing. So I just want to show you a very quick video it's from the movie Minority Report, and maybe we can just look at the interface and how the person interacts with the interface, and then we can talk about it, because we're always looking forward as well as back in terms of interface design. So we'll just play this. Let me know if the sound works okay.
I show 8 Howard marks in the district, sorting by race and age. And their license registration. See if I can capture an address yet.
I was thinking maybe I'd play hockey and stay home today.
Can you grab that?
Sinclair.
I got 6 licenses. Where do you want? Over here, please.
Very sorry. No, blind iron without them.
No, we'll just leave it there because we're a little bit pushed for time. So how is the user interacting with the interface there? So in the movie, with Tom Cruise, how is he controlling the system? What's he doing? So how is he interacting with the computer system? What method is he using? Yeah, with his hands. Yeah, so it's a gesture based. So he doesn't have a mouse, right? He actually has a, you can see it on his hand. He has a sort of a graphic glove on, or he has a glove that has lights on it. You know, it's tracking the motion of his hand, and the interface has been projected. It looks like some sort of 3D projection, and he can grab parts of the interface. He can move them, that type of stuff. So that's a gesture-based system. He has a display in front of him so he can see things, but it seems to be in 3 dimensions, and that he can grab layers and what have you. So new ways of interacting with interfaces, they're coming up all the time. You know, like today we have voice control. So we have, you know, Siri, we have Alexa, we have Google Home, those sort of things. And these are all devices without displays and without a mouse or a keyboard or a more traditional method to interact. So we need to use our voice, and a lot of the feedback we get from the system is also sound feedback as well, right? But you can buy, even today, you can buy control systems that allow you to interact with the devices through motion. You've probably seen them. There was a games console add-on a couple of years back called Microsoft Kinect, I think it was. And you could actually use your gestures to control the device. There's also a device called Leap Motion that you can use. I'll show you this very quickly. Pause it there. So we just have a quick look at this. Leap Motion. So it's a tracking device. So it's quite small. It just plugs into your machine, and then it generates, I suppose, an infrared field, and it tracks the movement of your hands in front of the computer and allows you to interact with the device. So you could use this instead of, it's maybe a couple of $100 or whatever. But as time goes on, we'll see more and more of these devices coming out. You know, being able to control a device or a computer just through natural movements and natural interaction. It's very futuristic. Now, some applications, or like, I wouldn't like to be trying to, you know, use a word processor or a spreadsheet application through, you know, gesture-based movements. You're better off using something like that with a, you know, a keyboard and a mouse. So yeah, so future developments, or what's around the corner in terms of interface design. You have the different displays where you have layers and there's that 3D rendering. You have displays that are mobile. You have this interaction. using maybe data globes or tracking natural movements. The use of holographics. Potentially you could have real-time newspapers. I suppose, look, our phones are real-time newspapers. And these are some of the things that popped up in the science fiction movie. Okay, so the development of HCI. So this is the end of this particular section. We just look at a summary. So early designs were restricted by the hardware available. First, we had our command line editor, which remember was text-based. Then we have our graphical user interface. And as part of that system, you had windows, icons, menus, and pointers. That developed into web interfaces. And then we had, specialized interfaces for, people with additional needs. And right now and in the future, we're seeing, voice recognition, motion tracking, those sort of things. So new ways to interact with devices. Okay, any questions on that, guys, or any comments before we move on? No, everyone good? No questions. Okay, great. So look, we're just going, I suppose, through the history of interface design and human-computer interaction. And sometimes a good way to look forward is, starting out and you do a review of what has happened previously. Okay, so we'll do a quick look back, and then we can move through some of the developments and maybe have a quick chat before the end. So if we pick a particular operating system, in this case, it's actually Windows, and we look, and I suppose just even from a broad visual sense, if we can compare the original designs that would have come out in the mid-80s with the sort of designs that we have today in Windows 10 and Windows 11. So this is a snapshot of Windows 1. So this would have come out in 1985. So how does this design grab you? Well, what do you notice about the design, right? So I suppose, what if you contrast this design, which was about, maybe 10 years previous, to that design? Well, what's the first thing that's obvious? Colors, yeah, the use of colored display, right? So, but you can see the pixelation, and you can see the sort of the low resolution, where you can actually almost see the individual dots, right? And that's just because of limitations in the hardware. Now, you can also see there's a tremendous amount of text, right? So if you think of comparing that with comparing, like something like this, where it's entirely graphic based, or, maybe even another way to interact where it's, through voice or whatever. But this is predominantly text based. So you can see lots and lots of text there. So there's a lot of reading, and it also seems to be quite technical as well. And there seems to be lots of MS-DOS commands. So that was Windows version 1, 1985. Windows version 2, right? You can see there's slightly less text. It's still there, right? It seems that these little boxes and these windows, they can be resized and they can be moved. And this, just a couple of years later, you can see a development towards a more graphic sort of interface. Also, maybe they're starting to lock down the color system a little bit. So this seems to be all over the place. There's greens, reds, yellows, blues. This one now seems to start leaning towards a sort of maybe a blue palette. And then you have certain colors that might be used for highlighting, right? So this was the first versions of Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. So 1987, a little bit of a jump then up to 1994. You're starting to settle into what they it's almost like the traditional Windows kind of color palettes where you have these grays and sort of blues. You can see it's starting to look more modern and more like something that we might see today in a kind of contemporary operating system, right? 1995, I think this was one of the first times, yeah, the start menu was developed, and you're starting to see this dial-up networking, which is like I suppose the first phase in the internet. So you have, you know, this menu system very similar to what I have up here, where I can go into menus and submenus and that kind of thing, right? So this probably took like 10 years from 85 to 95 to get to that stage. Then Windows 98, again, looking very like, maybe with just slightly lower resolution, very like the operating systems that we see today. Okay, Windows Millennium, Windows 2000, I suppose not radically different. Windows 2000, let me see, it was designed for client servers based on, yeah, again, quite similar. Windows XP, I suppose, was the big jump in that everything just started to look a little bit more styled and just a little bit prettier. If you look at the, I suppose, the icons that are used here and the pictures, these look quite pixelated, but these just look, I suppose, more appealing to the eye and to the user. You've also got to a stage where you can start to display nice pictures on the desktop and in the background, because now the computer and the display they can output at that resolution. Windows Vista 2007, right? Very similar to an operating system you'd see today. You can almost see a sort of a layering effect where certain layers and certain windows and tiles have a certain transparency. So I can see the background there through this menu, and that gives me a sort of a sense of space and a sense of layering. Okay, Windows 7, it was like a cleanup really of Windows Vista. And then Windows 8 was quite a big redesign, right? That if you compare this or this to this looks very much like something that you'd find on a mobile phone. It was called a Metro style interface. And Microsoft, they ran this for a version or two and then decided to revert back to the start menu based on the feedback from the users. Because obviously you had millions of users who had grown up and gone through Windows XP, Vista and Windows 7, and they kind of liked this start menu because they knew where stuff was and knew how to find things. So the learnability was a factor there. And then Microsoft completely changed it all in Windows 8. And then in Windows 10, that was acknowledged as a mistake. And they brought back the traditional sort of start menu, right? So this would be very similar to, you know, a modern day operating system, right? So again, huge differences between this design, Windows 10, and something like this, which is Windows 1. So you can see the development there over time. You can see the, you know, the advanced capabilities in the hardware where things just look more engaging. Everything's been tightened up, the use of fonts, the use of icons, the pictures, and the color scheme, and everything just feels more packaged and uniform. Okay, so that's an example there of the evolution of a user interface linked to one operating system happening, you know, over 20 years or so. And it's still happening today, like Windows 11. Has anyone seen Windows 11? Have any of you guys encountered Windows 11? There's the Windows 11 interface. Yeah. Has anyone upgraded their device to Windows 11 yet? No, I haven't either on my devices, if they're PC or Windows, Windows 10. You did. And how do you find it, James? You find it similar? Good, good. It looks quite, the best way I can describe it is, I suppose it looks kind of like what I would expect on a Mac, right? Because on a Mac, you don't have a start menu, you have a thing called the dock. So this is my dock on my Mac, right? See that thing that appears, that menu system on the side? Now I can position that dock. So can you move this around? So see this thing down the bottom, right, where it allows you to get into the apps. Can you move that around, James? So could that go up on the side? No, they've pinned it. Okay, interesting. So they're sticking, I suppose, close to this sort of concept, where you have what they call the taskbar, right? So let's just go back to the screenshot again. Okay, interesting. But again, looks lovely. Looks really nice. You can see the transparency in the kind of the interface. See the way I can see the back image, and this other image is almost superimposed on it, or this window. You can see huge use of iconography. Everything looks very stylized. They've nailed down all the fonts. Looks quite like a web page or something. So I suppose, look, we'll all move to Windows 11 if we're running PCs very shortly anyway. Okay, so that's just a brief snapshot then of the development of an operating system over time. Okay, so the next thing, any questions on that or any comments before I moved on? So I want to just try and get through as many of these as I can. Okay, no questions. Okay, great. And if you guys ever have questions, you can always feed them back to me through the college or through your tutors. So let's talk about the, excuse me, the social impact of human-computer interaction. So I suppose the way we all use computers and devices, they have changed our lives, and the developments in HCI brought about a culture in which computers are used in everyday life. Now, much of the population now uses a computer of some form or another every single day. And many lives depend on computers, for example, in hospitals, in transport, in medical research, in planes, all those things. And this next section explores how technological developments both support and protect us, as well as the relatively simple interfaces that we use in homes and offices today. So there's simple ones, there's also very complicated ones as well. So this first one, this is something that you might find on a washing machine, where you have maybe 3 or 4 pieces of information. You have a couple of different programs, quite easy to figure out, most likely to be a touch screen. You press it, and then you have something like this. Can you guess what this other? So what's that an interface from? So what does that look like? So what kind of device would you find an interface like that? Any ideas? Navigation device. So yeah, it's a cockpit. It's actually the inside of a plane. It could be a flight simulator. So it's showing you direction, altitude, all those kind of things. So again, much more complicated than device above, which is just a simple sort of washing machine. So, excuse me, improved usability. So users benefit from developments in HCI by being able to easily log in to computers and to load programs, right? So big developers such as Microsoft use a consistent approach to their toolbars, their menus, and their GUIs, right? So if you think of an application like Excel or Microsoft Word, very simple menu system that we're all sort of familiar with, right? I have it here on this. Again, this is my menu system. I have, you know, primary menus, secondary menus. I'll have the same on my browser, right? See the way I have these are my menus, right? Again, it's a concept that we've, I suppose, all grown up with, and that it's familiar to us, where you have this like structured approach to navigation on the interface. And this consistency is very important, because it means then your navigation of the interface, your skills are transferable, because you can use one device and then very easily go in and use a second device or a second application. So if I know how to use Microsoft Word and I get a handle on the type of functions that are in the menus, I can very easily use Excel, I can use Keynote, I can use these other kind of applications. So what's important there are the structures and the layouts of the menus. You know, if my menu system was reversed, I would, you know, you naturally, once you learn a system, you know, it's like driving a particular car. You know, the second car that you drive, you're going to sort of remember what it was like to drive the first car. And, you know, if the controls were in radically different places, then it makes it more difficult to remember, right? And this consistency, right, simplifies input and output. And it also gives the user a sense of confidence. So it makes the whole design more user-friendly. Domestic appliances. So one of the ways you achieve this friendliness is through the use of symbols, where you can instead of text. So why would a designer use symbols instead of text? So why would somebody use these icons instead of writing what the thing is? Any ideas? Yeah, more attractive. So say I just pop in a piece of text. So why doesn't it say this? So why do I have this? And yes, more attractive is the correct answer. But why doesn't it say that? Yeah, could it be to do with languages, right? And different people speak different languages. So if I'm a designer and I write in home, yeah, easier to see, definitely, right? If I write in home here, then I'm sort of limiting myself a little bit to, you know, the English speaking world. But if I use a picture, which is quite universal, then my design is accessible to more and more people, right? So what do these icons mean? So what's this blue one? Yeah, very good. And the magnifying glass? Search. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well done. Yeah, and this use of iconography, or this use of these simple images, right? And you see them across all apps and websites. If we go back to our screenshot here of Windows 11, you can see they've started. So here's an envelope for the email application. The calendar kind of looks like a calendar. The settings is a sort of a cogwheel. The to-do list has a tick beside it. The calculator, it looks like a calculator. And this use of iconography is very important across user interfaces, because it makes the interface more friendly for the user, you know? So you can see even on something like a washing machine, like this is the spin function and it has a sort of a spin symbol on it. You know, this is hand wash, this is wool, this would be delicates. This is cold, you know? So you see this use of symbols and this iconography across all different types of devices. And what it does is it improves the usability of the device, and it just makes it a little bit more friendlier for the user, right? So we're talking about usability. So what is it? So usability is it's a measure of how well a specific user in a specific context can use a product or design to achieve a goal efficiently, effectively, and satisfactorily, right? And designers usually measure a design's usability throughout the development process. And then that's right from wireframes through to the final design. And so if we look at what usability is, effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. So how enjoyable or how engaging is the device, right? What you have here on the right is an example of a wireframe, and they talk about the user journey. So you can see the user presses this app icon, and then they're connected to the second screen, right? And then they sign in, and then when they sign in, they can see this screen. And then from that screen, they have two options. They can go here or they can go here. And what people do, user experience or UX designers, they actually sit down and, you know, at a very early stage in a design, they will try and predict what they call the user journey and how the user will use the app and navigate through the design. So you could do it on using something as simple as, you know, these things, posters. And you can actually map out your design. You draw it out on a piece of paper. And this is way before you sit down and you try and code your design into your device. So, and you try and get a handle on the type of journey and the type of things that the user might do. And that happens right through the design process, right from the very initial idea, right up to the final design. So you constantly need to test and you constantly need to refine your design. And one of the ways you do this is by trying to measure usability, right? And then you're measuring the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the satisfaction of your design. Usability is important because if your design or your device or your interface has low usability, then people won't want to come back and use it, and essentially it will fail, right? So what are the different facets of usability? Effectiveness. So this supports users in completing the actions accurately, right? Efficiency. Users can perform tasks quickly through the easiest process. You have engagement or satisfaction, right? And users find it pleasant to use and appropriate for its industry or topic, right? So look at the example of the Microsoft interface in Windows 8, where they essentially built an interface that was more suited to a mobile device rather than a PC. And then the feedback they got from their users was actually quite low in terms of engagement, right? Because the users didn't find it appropriate to use a laptop like this. So you also have what they call error handling or error tolerance. And that's when a user makes a mistake on the system. How does the interface help the users recover? So if you go into a particular screen on a website, how do you get out of it? Or if you go into a particular page in an app, can you get back to where you already were? Or do you end up in a form of a cul-de-sac where you just get to this street and there's no way to turn around in it, right? So error handling should support a range of user actions and only shows an error in genuine situations where the app crashes or the website crashes or something like that. And you can achieve this by finding out the number, type, and severity of common errors. So what you do as part of the testing process is you actually, you get your users to use your app, and you see how many of them get stuck or get confused or end up having a problem with the app. And then you try and measure those over time and count them, right? You're always trying to achieve this ease of learning, right? Where new users or people who haven't seen your interface or app before, they can go in and quite quickly they can use it, you know, because they're relying on what they might know already, right? So remember, these are all ways to measure, I suppose, the success of your design. And if a design has good usability, right, that will, you know, yeah, it's more successful, right? So you have effectiveness. Can the users achieve their goals on your site or on your interface? You have efficiency. How quickly can users achieve? So that's how, you know, effective your site is. Learnability. Is the site easy to learn the first time that users encounter it? Memorability. Can they repeat their actions, and the next time they come into your app or onto your site or onto your interface, will they be able to remember what they did last time, you know? So if you think of something like using a washing machine or a microwave, you know, and you've used it once, and then when you go in the second time, will you be able to use it again without difficulty? Error handling. So if the user has a problem or they get stuck in a particular area or menu, how do they get back to where they were? And then user satisfaction. Do users like using your website? And, you know, ultimately, would they recommend it to others? Right, so these all factors in determining usability. Okay, so I suppose we do the last slide maybe for today. So usability, it's super important. So when people first encounter an interface, users should be able to find their way around it easy enough to achieve objectives without relying on outside expert knowledge. A design with high usability guides users through the easiest and least labor-intensive route. So you must leverage a deep understanding of user context. And to do that, you must accommodate their limitations, such as their environment, likely distractions, and what they call the cognitive load. So the cognitive load is how much does a user need to think to use the design. So if something has a high cognitive load, then there's a fair bit of thinking involved, right? So remember, usability involves navigation, familiarity, consistency, error prevention, feedback, the clarity in terms of what the users are looking at, and then it should be as flexible as possible, right? So that's just a brief overview of usability, guys, and why it's important.